He drives for the enemy now. So why does Toto Wolff still call him our driver? Formula One has seen its share of dramatic moments. Title fights decided on the last lap, teams switching allegiances, drivers walking away at the peak of their powers. But what happened in Shanghai in March 2026 was something different. It wasn't a crash, it wasn't a controversy. It was a few words from a team principal that managed to stop the entire paddock in its tracks and send fans around the world into an emotional spiral. To understand why, you have to go back to where this story truly begins. The partnership that defined an era. Between 2013 and 2024, Lewis Hamilton and Toto Wolff built the most dominant driver-team partnership Formula One has ever seen. Hamilton secured 6 of his 7 World Championship titles during that time, he with Wolff leading Mercedes through the most successful stretch in the team's history. They weren't just boss and driver, they were allies, confidants, people who genuinely pushed each other to be better. So when Hamilton announced he was leaving for Ferrari ahead of the 2025 season, the shock rippled across the sport. After 12 years, the Silver Arrows would race without their talisman, and the man who had built that dynasty alongside him, Toto Wolff, would have to watch from the other side of the garage. 2025. The hardest year. What followed for Hamilton in his debut Ferrari season was, by any measure, the most painful stretch of his career. He struggled for form from the very beginning, with 4 Grand Prix finishes of 10th, 7th, 5th, and 7th in the opening races, while teammate Charles Leclerc scored Ferrari's first podium of the season. The car wasn't giving him what he needed. The feedback wasn't there. The confidence wasn't there either. It came to a head in Hungary. Hamilton qualified 12th on the grid, while his teammate secured pole and described himself as absolutely useless, suggesting Ferrari should look to replace him. He finished the race in the same position, outside the points, and spoke of looking forward to the summer break, with a lot going on in the background that is not great. It was raw, it was painful, and it was very Lewis. But here is where Toto Wolff's response became notable. Rather than staying quiet, rather than letting Hamilton's situation play out from a distance, he spoke. Wolff said, "That is Lewis, wearing his heart on his sleeve. It was very raw. He was down on himself. We had it in the past when he felt that he'd underperformed in his own expectations. He wasn't distancing himself. He was defending him. He definitely has it." Wolff didn't stop there. When asked whether Hamilton still had what it takes to compete at the front, Wolff was unequivocal. Lewis has unfinished business in Formula One. In the same way that Mercedes underperformed over the latest set of regulations since 2022, he kind of never got happy with ground effect cars. In the same way, it beats him. The implication was clear. The problem wasn't Hamilton, it was the machinery. Give him a car he trusts, and he's back. Wolff said plainly, he shouldn't go anywhere next year. Brand new cars, completely different to drive. New power units which need an intelligent way of managing the energy. I hope he's in this sport for many more years. And then came the line that resonated loudest across the paddock. If he has a car underneath him that he has confidence in, that does what he wants, then yes, he can win an 8th title. But you ask me if he still has it? He definitely has it. A sitting team principal, whose team is now competing directly against Hamilton, publicly stating that his rival driver is good enough to win the World Championship. That is not a normal thing to say. That is not something born out of politics or strategy. That is personal. Still talking. Still together. Even through the chaos of 2025, the communication between Hamilton and Wolff never stopped. Mercedes' chief communications officer Bradley Lord revealed that Wolff would regularly travel with Hamilton from races and speak with him directly to encourage him. We know how much heart and soul Lewis puts into his work, how committed he is, how much he trains. We try to support him in our own way, because we know that Lewis Hamilton can still be a benchmark, and we still believe he can do it. That's not a former employer keeping tabs. That's something closer to family. As 2026 approached and F1 reset its regulations entirely, Hamilton made calls to gather intelligence before the season began. He rang Wolff before the opening race, along with McLaren CEO Zak Brown, trying to understand what the tests had really shown about the competitive order. And he said afterwards, "I called Toto Wolff at Mercedes and Zak Brown at McLaren to try to understand what they understood, but I didn't get any results." Even in competition, the lines were open. Shanghai, 2026. The moment that stopped. F1. Then came China. The 2026 season had started with Mercedes making a statement in Australia. A dominant one too, with George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. Ferrari and Hamilton were chasing. Heading into Shanghai, something had shifted. Hamilton had already secured a P3 in the Chinese sprint race, his first top 3 result since joining Ferrari. In qualifying for the Grand Prix itself, he went even further, splitting the 2 Mercedes cars in the results. Mercedes shared a video of Wolff checking the qualifying results board in the garage. It showed Antonelli first, Russell second, and Hamilton third. With no team names on the board, Wolff did a double take. He initially thought for a moment that 3 of his drivers were starting from the front 3 positions. He smiled, looked up, and said, clearly, warmly, without hesitation, "Still our driver." 3 words, that's all it took. The reaction that said everything. The video went viral instantly. "Toto Wolff is just my guy. His love for Lewis is genuine," one fan wrote. "That still our driver hits hard," said another. A third offered, "Toto knows you can change the paint, but you can't overwrite 12 years of execution." People weren't just reacting to a funny clip. They were reacting to something that felt true. In a sport where contracts are currency and loyalty is conditional, he here was one of the most powerful figures in Formula One looking at a driver now wearing another team's colors, his direct rival on the grid, and still claiming him as one of his own. It was a short sentence that carried 12 years of history inside it. The Chinese Grand Prix podium. The weekend didn't end with qualifying. On Sunday, Kimi Antonelli won the Chinese Grand Prix, his maiden Formula One victory, with George Russell second and Lewis Hamilton third. It was Hamilton's first podium in Ferrari red. On that podium stood 3 drivers who had each, at different points in their careers, been shaped by Toto Wolff. Antonelli, his newest project. Russell, the driver who had carried Mercedes through the transition years, and Hamilton, the man who had built the dynasty in the first place. Wolff said afterwards, "It's been a while since I've been in Formula One, but that podium now is probably one of the best moments I've ever had in Formula One. The 3 of them, with Bono right in the middle. Rarely am I overwhelmed, but that is such a moment." The following day, Wolff revealed the text exchange that had been happening behind the scenes. He told Sky Sports, "I was texting with him yesterday evening and said I'm happy to see that you enjoy the race, these cars. And he said, yeah, I'm in a good place now." What it all means. Here is the reality of what Toto Wolff has done over the past 12 months, and particularly these last few weeks. He has, publicly and repeatedly, gone on record to say that Lewis Hamilton is the greatest of all time, that he still has what it takes to win an 8th title, that his struggles in 2025 were about the car and not the driver, and that leaving Mercedes was the right call for his legacy. All of this about a man now driving for a rival team, a team that finished ahead of Mercedes on the podium in China. Think about what that actually requires. It requires Wolff to set aside every competitive instinct he has. It requires him to publicly boost the confidence of a driver who could, if Ferrari gets everything right, take points away from his own cars. It requires a level of genuine human feeling that the sport rarely makes room for. Most team principals would stay diplomatically neutral. Wolff chose something rarer. He chose honesty. In the cold logic of Formula One, none of that makes sense. Rivals don't speak like that about each other. His team principals don't emotionally claim former drivers who now wear the wrong colors. But Wolff did. And that, more than any lap time or championship position, is what stopped the F1 grid. Because it reminded everyone watching that beneath the data, the strategy, and the politics, this sport is still built on human beings. And some bonds don't expire when the contract does. Lewis Hamilton may now wear red, but in Toto Wolff's eyes, it seems he never really left.